How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Guys, today we're going to talk about the 5 dysfunctions of a team. And this is our effort to understand what those dysfunctions are and then to go ahead and work on making sure that our team is as cohesive as possible. The model, or what we're getting this dialogue from, is a book from Patrick Lencioni, and it's called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. But how we're going to express this dialogue is we're going to take the theories from his book and we are going to go ahead and apply it to the correctional setting. I think the reason why this is a good dialogue is because this truly gives you an understanding of the perspective of what good management is trying to achieve. And I think it's good for those in the front line to get an understanding of what we as management is trying to accomplish. But before we touch on this dialogue, let me go ahead and tell you a couple of things. First, we have my book, Inmate Manipulation. That's on the market, Inmate Manipulation Decoded. This book is used for training all across the country. If you guys get a chance, please check it out. The link to this book is in the description. And we also have lessons. What is it? How to Succeed in Corrections, Lessons Learned While Working in a Prison. Guys, this book is doing very well. It's only available on blue360media.com. Link to that is also in the description. But guys, this book just got tons of tips and advice from not just myself, from other people in the profession. And this book will definitely help you succeed in this career. Trust me. And I have another book coming out at the beginning of this year coming up. It's going to partner with this book, about another 40, 50 tips in the next book coming out. And that's also going to be published by Blue 360 Media. So guys, I'm really trying to build a bunch of knowledge so we can have these collections of reading material and then we can know exactly what we're going into. Just in case YouTube ever goes down, a lot of the stuff that is on YouTube has been translated into these books. And again, I have the one coming out. All right, let me get Russ. What's up, Russ?
Anthony, how's it going, sir?
Good. Russ, do you mind introducing yourself to our audience, please?
Of course. My name is Russ Hamilton. I am a former and retired sergeant from California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. I've also spent some time as a senior juvenile correctional officer. I currently work for a private company where we do reentry and rehabilitation work for a local probation department and a local county jail where I'm the case manager. I am also the founder of a little concern called Keepers of Chaos, where we focus on the profession itself and really work on, everything from, history and training, and just, everything positive about corrections to try and support each other. I also just founded a new Facebook group called Correctional Fitness and Recreation. And that's to kind of, help everybody, share what they do as far as working out, exercises, and recreation as well. Everything from paddle boarding to putting lead on those targets. So I'm trying to get everyone enthused with that. So come and check it out.
Hey, Russ, before we go into the dialogue, because this really is a leadership dialogue, and I think it's going to be a great opportunity to give the front line a perspective of how prison management should be thinking. I would like to say that we're all thinking in this way, but we're not. Plus, if you are in prison management or if you just have a leadership position, this would be a good video for you to watch as well. But before we go into that, I wanted to dedicate 3 minutes. Quick question I want to ask Russ before we get into the dialogue. Russ, I recently saw an article about California, specifically San Quentin, trying to be adopted into the model of a Norwegian system. I know we don't have a lot of time on this, and maybe one day we could devote a show on this, but could you give me a quick 3 minutes about what your thoughts on that is?
Yes, of course. There are a lot of people in this world who manage to do bad things by wanting to do good things. I think, it's my opinion, that this is indeed the case. That does not mean that in my mind, or I don't think it should be in anyone else's mind, that the need for rehabilitation aspects is obviated or not necessary. I think that that's an important component to have in there. When we start to look at what other countries are doing, what other countries have done, and we just say, "Hey, yeah, look at the success they're having," I think we have to back off from that. I don't think that we can just automatically assume that they're having success. So, a lot of these, those countries over in that section of the world, aren't necessarily as upfront as they should be as about exactly what's going on. Some of their more hardcore type prisoners, inmates, criminals are being farmed out to other countries because they can't deal with them. And so I think that, and the whole idea, there isn't the level of free speech that we have here with regards to journalism, journalists, or the way journalists used to act, where they used to dig into things. And so I don't think that you could just say, hey, they have something that works. And then here, we're just assuming that it's going to work across the board. We have unique issues here. We have a unique population, and we have a bigger population that has a lot more issues like drug abuse and mental disease and gangs and things like that. And you just can't plug it in and say it's going to work. I think that's just, a really bad idea to think that. I know that if I were to take, my level 1 and 2 inmates and plug them in over there, that they would break that system in 2 weeks. I think that if I took my level 3 and 4s from the California system and plugged them in over there, that they'd break the system in about a day and a half tops. That is my own assessment. That assessment is born of, someone who's, been in the system for more than 30 years now, though. And the do-good mindset, you can look at it from a lot of different perspectives. When we look at a different aspect of that, where some people used to be really enthused about, what, man, socialism and communism is the way to go, and then you say, hey, what about all these other countries that tried it and failed? And they go, yeah, but we haven't tried it yet. I think there's a lesson to be learned there. Just being so, full of hubris that you think that just because you haven't tried your particular brand of it is not the way that we want to go. I wish that they would put the brakes on it and ask for some, other experts to chime in, maybe a guy like Leonard Sipes or somebody like that. I'd give them my 2 cents worth, not that they would care. But I think that, the idea that they're suddenly going to be met with, great success, it's just not going to be the case. I hope I'm proven wrong, but it seems unlikely. Anyway, I think I took more than 3 minutes, but.
Yeah, when I saw it, I wanted to get your input on it. I mean, again, I'll keep my perspective short. I think we have a different type of inmate. And I think that people believe that when you offer something, inmates are so willing to take it. Now, granted, this would be seen as something more rewarding, but that doesn't mean it's the right thing. Our system, for me, works better when you're able to take things away to motivate proper behavior and not provide and keep on providing, because then people take advantage of it. So I'm used to a system that is monitored through loss versus gain. That's the system. We take away what you're used to, and if you do the right thing, you get the stuff back. I don't believe in constant rewarding, behavior that really, I'm sorry, where's the level of accountability? And we're going to discuss a little bit of accountability today. Okay, so this is like a leadership discussion technically, but I just think it's going to be a good discussion because it's going to open our eyes to a different perspective. And again, it's coming from the book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni. Now, real quick, a lot of people may not realize this, but corrections, I kind of consider corrections like a small community. Even though I may call it a house, it's got many different parts. I guess if I want to equate it to the metaphor of a house, there's many different rooms. But at the end of the day, we all have to be working together in order for the house to stand successfully. And one of the questions someone had asked me a while back, and it's funny because the question is reiterated here in this book, is what's more important, the team you lead or the team you're a member of? And I think that's a very powerful way to start the dialogue, because at the end of the day, if we just look at what our department does, or if we are a supervisor in that department and our main focus is the team that we lead, we may lose out on the bigger picture, which is the team that we are a member of. And having said that, being in prison management, on the administrative level, and in order to keep the house running as it's supposed to, the most effective, you start to realize that the team is a lot bigger than most people may believe. I know when I was an officer, a sergeant, I was very myopic to some extent in my perspective. And then the moment I moved up to administration, my perspective grew because I was forced to oversee pretty much areas of responsibility that I never really knew even existed, or at least to that level, which was actually the best gift the department could have ever given me. I'm not going to lie about that. I mean, to learn how to run a prison, which ultimately, believe it or not, has been my goal, is just to keep on learning more and more about prison management, to hand me over these different responsibilities has literally been the best gift in what I seek to do in my career, which is constantly learning and evolving myself so I can truly be an advocate for the corrections profession. So with that said, Russ, I like that first statement where it says, what's more important, the question, what's more important, the team you lead or the team you're a member of? For me, I know when I have everybody up at the table and we're trying to solve issues, I always tell people at the end of the day, we have to do things for what's best for the house. And usually what's best for the house does travel down to what's best for the people. Now, would you consider corrections, especially if you're in prison management, literally like a community with many moving parts?
Yeah, there's always going to be layers, within the system, and those layers roughly correspond to what the chain of command is, and then the chain of command is generally governed by policy, procedure, and the law. And so, all of that, is kind of, a baked in formula for the way things, tend to work, the way things tend to get done, or maybe sometimes the way things don't work and the way things don't tend to get done. Sometimes that's just a function of where you're at in a specific area of time on the scale as it goes. And we should all be working to try and make things work better and more effectively.
Now, mind you, guys, working in corrections, it's a lot more than just safety and security, which definitely is the foundation. Everything in corrections does revolve around safety and security, but it also has the needs of other departments because we are a small community. So medical, mental health, social services, education, chaplaincy, drug support programming. I mean, the list goes on. Mental health. I mean, the list goes on. Maintenance. I mean, it is a small community itself. And as you start to move up, you start to see the bigger picture. You start to see how all the parts move together in an effort to keep the house standing. Now, in this book, the book expresses the importance of having a cohesive team, which means that when you're in a position to manage all this, it's going to be very hard to get everybody to get along, because everybody has their own perspective on how things should be done. I would say, and I'm not going to say that we're constantly at war, but I definitely see when you have two departments that are considered priority departments, let's say custody and medical, they could be considered one of the top moving departments. But to be honest with you, it also could be situational. At any moment, food service could become a priority. At any moment, commissary could become a priority. It really does matter on what the situation is and our ability to shift and help that department that now becomes that main priority. So, Russ, would you agree that, yes, safety and security is always the foundation, but at the end of the day, at any moment, priorities could shift, and now the resources and our efforts to help that other department now becomes a priority?
Well, yeah, priorities, fortunately, unfortunately, how you want to look at it, tend to be about where the failure is occurring as opposed to the success, right? We can have an otherwise, successful looking set of programs, but, if one important part of it is going down and flagging, it always threatens to take the rest of it down. So when we're shifting priorities, suddenly, we're under the microscope for, perhaps not providing what's viewed as a right with regards to, let's say, medical. And then, suddenly everybody wants to shift, and that shift then suddenly starts, negatively impinging on the resources of some of these other parts of the body that were doing fine before, and throws the whole thing out of whack. So, I hope that kind of, just gives you an idea that, we do have an ever-present shift with regards to things where the failures are starting to come in, especially if those things are viewed in a certain way by some of the political machinery that runs us.
Right. And guys, as you move up in prison management, and you do oversee the generalized functions of a correctional facility. Now, what I mean by the generalized functions is basically your job is to be a resource for those departments so they can keep moving. And as prison management, you have to try to be as objective as possible, because at the end of the day, is you want to keep each department moving. And I know when I was an officer, I was trained to always tell people no, because, telling the inmates no was always that safe bet. But as you start to move up and you oversee the people who oversee the people who oversee the people that got to get the job done, you really don't want to tell them no. You want to show an exhausted effort to provide a yes, because when you start to say no, that department freezes. And it kind of messes with the overall effectiveness of the facility. So when I look down and I look to see at the facility running, the generalized functions, and we have concerns, I usually filter my concerns through 3 keywords: safety, security, and care. Usually, however I make a decision, somehow it's going to involve where we could be most effective in those 3 areas: safety, security, and care. Obviously, safety and security is a strong foundation, but there's also a lot of liability if you're not properly caring for the inmates as well, which could come through medical, mental health, rehabilitative programming, maintenance. I mean, so I feel that those 3 areas, and would you agree with that, Russ, are where the greatest liabilities are: safety, security, and care?
Yeah, safety and security, if we botch those, we've really kind of, failed in our primary duty, which is always going to be to public safety. Public safety is always job one. I think that part of the things that fall down around us, though, are when people forget that and they start deciding that, that programming is job one. No, programming can be an element of public safety, but it's not the imminent part of it that matters the most, which is keeping the wolves inside the cage, so to speak. And so I think that, we really have to be focused on what these things mean, why we bring these concepts out, and just know that all of these other, ancillary things, need to take a back seat. Care with regard to that, obviously, we have to be providing medical care. We have to be providing mental health. And then there has to be, that rehabilitation aspect, for drugs, alcohol, that kind of things, as well as, we don't want to leave a blank slate there. Some of these guys, necessarily or unnecessarily, depending on how you look at it, are going to be re-entering society. And if we don't make them ready in some way, they will present a threat then to public safety. So I think that about sums it up.
It does. And guys, as prison management and just basically trying to give you guys a perspective, especially if you're from the front line looking up, I try to balance all three, safety, security, and care, trying to give them all equal value, but that's not going to be the case every day. Sometimes it's going to be safety and security where that's going to be our focus. We're going to really got to put our energy towards that. And sometimes it's care. I don't want these inmates to be forgotten about when it comes to medical or mental health. Like I want care, and sometimes I still want to have it balanced out with safety and security, but could get to a point sometimes where safety and security could be an obstacle towards getting that care, or vice versa. Sometimes care could be an obstacle to providing safety and security. So our job is to try to keep things balanced at all times. And even though I'm kind of giving it like a little bit of a generalized summary, it is hard to balance day-to-day care, safety, and security, but that's what we do. Now, with that said, because it's so complex, and within those three areas, there's so many things that, to be honest with you, I don't really have an expertise in. At some point, it's, hey, I need to be a resource. I'm going to show you that I care. What do you need? But I'm going to leave it to the experts, because that's why they're getting paid to be there. Like, I'm not going to tell medical that they got a wrong diagnosis. I'm just not. And for my guys, my majors in custody, I'm not really, or I'm going to try not to step on their toes when they are discussing security. I mean, yes, even though I have it as in my background, they are my experts now. My job is to defer to them and then see, how we can collectively make a decision. Now, granted, and this is where we touch into the first topic of trust, I posted a question on my Facebook page today, and we talked about vulnerability, and does vulnerability play a part in corrections? Now, guys, we have to break away from certain definitions that are used on the outside because it doesn't apply on the inside, and it's okay for us, because we work in a different world, to shift the definition so we're able to create an understanding of how that word applies to our world. So when we talk about vulnerability, because that's the word that everybody seems to be scared about, we're not talking about vulnerability where you're weak, and you're afraid and you're scared. That's not the vulnerability that we're talking about. We're talking about vulnerability that allows for your staff to know that you're not perfect. I mean, right off the bat, for me, my staff know where my areas of weakness are, and therefore, they try to help me, but they don't see me as a weak leader, because you can lead with vulnerability. If I may not know at this point what's the best route to take, but I know where we have to be. And sometimes I may go to, let's say, Russ, and say, Russ, listen, I know today I'm having problems with these inmates. They keep on playing this game. I really need your help, because at the end of the day, I have to do A, B, and C. So what's your thoughts? Because I can't figure this out alone. So sense the vulnerability of it all. I'm telling Russ, I may not know how to get there, but there's also a leadership component there where I'm telling Russ, but I still want to be there. So I still want to get to this one area. So again, vulnerability is just allowing yourself as a leader to set the tone that we're not looking for perfection. And we'll explain where or how that's going to play out as you move up this pyramid. Let me show you guys this pyramid real quick. The pyramid starts from trust, goes into conflict, then commitment, then accountability, and ultimately your goals or your results. That's just how the pyramid looks. We're going to break it down so I can kind of break away from the pyramid. I just wanted to show you how it looks. So again, it starts from trust, then to a conflict, then commitment, accountability, and ultimately results. So Russ, at the end of the day, when I posted up that question on Facebook about vulnerability, what I meant was leading with vulnerability, which means that it's okay as a leader to say that you don't know everything. Because at the end of the day, if you don't admit that there are things that you don't know, maybe it's your pride, maybe it's your ego, you as a leader, you're going to make some mistakes. Because at the end of the day, all because I'm in prison management does not mean I know the specifics of every job that I'm responsible for, every job that I oversee. No, I got departmental experts. My job really is to lean on them and not micromanage the hell out of them. They're the ones that are supposed to tell me, hey, Gan, this is what we got going on. This is what we're going to do. My job is, hey, this is what I need. You tell me how to get there. Russ, what's your thoughts on that type of vulnerability?
Yeah, I still have a little bit of a problem with the terminology there. It just because it sounds foreign to me from the position. So what I try and relate it to is to try and have that open framework around me where I'm not only willing to accept other people's input, but I require them to give me input. You're going to be at your weakest if you ever believe that you can do it all on your own. You need to be able to rely on people to do a number of things, to give you input, to give you information, to give you solutions. One of my best supervisors, Craig Koenig, that was the thing he always used to tell me. He said, don't bring me your problems, bring me solutions. And so I think that, that's the aspect of it that I grasp better from thinking about it as being willing to be collaborative and willing to accept the idea that, other people might be more knowledgeable than you, probably are, and might be able to come up with a solution that you can't think of or that you can't implement, and that can actually step in there and facilitate your job a lot better than you can facilitate their job.
Yeah,
did I explain
right.
it?
No,
Okay.
you did. Like guys, so remember, books have evolved in what you call leadership or influence, because influence technically is leadership, and it's gone from management to now leadership, well, management to leadership, which is more about yourself. Now it's gone to team leadership. Team leadership in the books that have come out now do embrace a level of vulnerability with leaders to let them know that your job is to help the people who do the job. I mean, that's the key. Your job is to be a resource for them. And they say when people get promoted, sadly, people get promoted based on technical skills and not really on their ability to manage people. And I do find that in corrections, 100% that does apply. I think a lot of people that get promoted, if it's on a test or on an interview, whatever it is, very rarely are they getting promoted based on their ability to manage people. They're getting promoted based on this person does the best cell searches. And the sad thing is, and that was just a general example, the sad thing is sometimes we judge our leaders based on very myopic perspective. I mean, custody may look at me and say, I can't believe Gangi's in prison management. How many cell extractions has he actually done? I mean, what makes him think he could lead custody? And then you can get social service that could say, well, man, I can't believe that Gangi's in prison management because, how many programs has he ran, or, how many people have he tried to rehabilitate? And then you could get, any department has their own perspective on what they feel could be a great leader. So having said that, our job at this point is to literally say, hey, you know what? I wasn't hired to be a technical expert in those areas. My job really now is to help you be more effective. My job is to help you solve the problems that you may face, but ultimately my job is to empower you through by giving you the most tools that I can within the resources that I have. So again, and this is true, guys. I think for me, when I moved up, I had a lot of people wondering, because I oversaw departments I didn't have experience in, wondering, hey, can this guy really represent our department effectively? And for me, I first thing I thought was, man, I really got to learn their job. I really got to learn their job. But then I realized that's complex. I'm never certain jobs take years and years of just an apprenticeship before you can even embrace an elementary understanding of what that job is. So having said that, I said, hey, you know what? Maybe my job really isn't to know their job to a T. I mean, yes, I got to know enough of it, but not to the T, because again, I have my experts for that. My job really is to care for them. Let them know I care. Let me be a resource. Let me go ahead and be open to their suggestions, knowing that I don't want to be the smartest person in the room. I never want to be the smartest person in the room, and I don't want to come off as being the smartest person in the room. But Russ, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, everybody brings something to the table, and the higher up the chain you are, the more you have to view things from a generalized viewpoint. The specifics are going to be lost on you unless you've actually done that job. So you have to be able to be the bigger picture thinker and understand that you're not going to be able to specialize in all the ways that people further down the chain have to specialize in certain things. I think that brings an element, though, with some not supervisors, but certainly some administrators and managers, where they're blind sometimes to the talents that other people have. And sometimes they just need to step back, and they need to look at what those talents are, what those subject matter experts bring to the table, and then delegate. This whole thing, it's really about delegation. You have to be able to have a level of trust in your people, to be able to hand them the problem and expect that they're going to come back with an acceptable solution. And I think that's the way you have to look at it, because you're never going to be able to specialize in the ways that people below you have been able to do their job. Maybe in one or two areas that you're specifically familiar with, but not over the broad scope. I mean, that's just the way it is. You're looking at too big of an area. What different officers do, what different other staff specialties do in education, medical, everything else. It's too big. You're not going to be that subject matter expert in everything. We're lucky. I mean, I would say the average person is lucky if they're a subject matter expert in 3 things during their career.
Yeah, and guys, to be honest with you, for me, when I wind up overseeing all these departments, that's when the first time I realized that trust is automatic, distrust is earned. Because if I started entering these departments, or prison management, start overseeing these departments with distrust in my heart, I'm going to start micromanaging everything that they do. Now that gives a reason for the departments to step up and say, yo, this guy never did a cell extraction, he's telling me what to do. Or this person's never ran a program and they're telling me what to do. It's now you're putting yourself in that position because you're not trusting your people to be effective. They're put there for a reason. And the moment that they're not, if you get burned, then you hold them accountable. But having said that, I also want to mention that we're not, when I say vulnerable, it's not like it's a counseling session where you go in there and you're crying that you can't do the job, because then you're going to cross the boundaries of not being seen as being effective. So even when you're vulnerable, there's still that leadership component to it. It's leading with vulnerability. So basically is you still got to have a direction. I think for us as prison management, we have to have a direction. We have to let the people know that this is where we are trying to head. And at the end of the day, it's being vulnerable enough to ask your people, but how do you think it's best to get there? So again, you're leading with vulnerability. You're allowing your staff input. That's the key. And it does, real quick, it's the leader that sets the tone on this. It's not, the leader sets the tone. If I have worked in environments where I felt that I was pressured to be perfect as an officer, because the moment I made a mistake, even if it's a mistake that, again, wasn't intentional, it was just a human error. And I know we have huge consequences at the end of it. I get it. But remember, you have to look at mistakes in two different ways. Is this a competency concern? Can I correct the issue? Or is this really just negligence and the person doesn't care? Because the last thing you want to do is, as a manager, or someone in a position that oversees those individuals, is to treat them the same way. Like, if I have someone that I feel can be cultivated and they just made a human error, okay, I want to work with this person. I want to help cultivate this person, because I got to keep this person motivated. I got to keep this person inspired. I want decision makers. But if I have someone that's not doing the job and they're just negligent and they don't care, that's a whole different approach. But sometimes, unfortunately, bad managers pretty much generalize it. And basically, a person that makes an honest human error, even if it's based on good intent, winds up getting treated as if they're garbage, as if they're just negligent in their efforts. And then the problem is, the person that could be cultivated is now afraid to make decisions, because their supervisor, all they do all day is just kind of play CYA. So you're not getting the trust that you need. So again, if as a supervisor, I want to express a level of vulnerability so I can let people know that it's okay not to be perfect. And I think that this allows for the people that you oversee to know that, hey, you know what? It's okay to not be perfect. And the good thing about this all, and I would love to get Russ's thoughts on this, is that when people don't feel the pressure of being perfect, I think they wind up taking more strategic risk. And I'm using words Russ don't like. I use vulnerability and I use risk, but know that I partnered it with vulnerability, leadership vulnerability, and I also partnered it with strategic risk. But now think about this, Russ. If you're under the pressure to be perfect all the time, which, be honest with you, sometimes people that are stressed to be perfect just procrastinate because they're looking to make a perfect decision in a world that's forever moving. But if you put the pressures on someone to be perfect, the likelihood of them wanting to be a decision maker, especially if the consequences at the back end of making a choice is, hey, right, when you're wrong, I'm coming at you. I'm throwing the book at you. You wind up losing motivation from your front line, because, hey, you know what? I'm not going to make a decision if I'm going to get treated as if every time I make a mistake, I'm going to get the book thrown at me. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. One of the big things, that I was always told, by my supervisors is, hey, this is a risk business. Um, you know, uh, get ready to be put in that position, and for better or worse, there's going to be an outcome to this thing, and make sure that you're able to eke out the best win that you can, but it's never going to be perfect. So it's just one of those things where risk has to be something that you manage along the way. So I think that's the best I can do with that one, is just to feel that if you're expected to be perfect, um, you're going to hesitate, and if you're going to hesitate, your outcome's probably going to be a lot worse than if you didn't hesitate.
Now, guys, once trust is built, we move to the second level of this pyramid, which is about mastering conflict. Now, people hate the word conflict. It's something that people mostly avoid. But if there's trust underneath conflict, it actually turns out to be something that could be very rewarding for the agency, but also for innovation, for us to grow. Because here it is, me and Russ, let's say I'm on a higher level, Russ is on the lower level, but me and Russ are able to communicate. And Russ is honest with me, I'm honest with him. We're not always going to agree. Russ is going to have his perspective, I'm going to have mine. And without trust, If there's no trust and we start to argue, it's going to become personal. It's no longer about what's best for the agency. It's more about, I'm going to win this argument and Russ is going to lose it. And we don't want to have that, especially at the higher level of management, because if you avoid conflict at the top, someone's dealing with that at the bottom. Let's be honest. So if me and Russ are high level management, we don't get along with something, I will guarantee you there's going to be a divide somewhere on that front line there somewhere, because whatever conflict we don't resolve, it's going to get deferred. I mean, would you agree with that, Russ?
I agree with it. And the only reason that I agree with it is because I cannot hear you. Someone just tried to call and it knocked out my ability to hear. But basically, I can hear you again now.
But so basically, I said, Russ, is I'll make this quick. If I can't, if me and you are high level management, and let's say we represent two different departments, right? And me and you are in conflict, and there's no trust between us. We're just in conflict, so it's personal, right? So basically, it's not about what's right for the agency, what's right for the people. It's more about, I'm going to win this argument and you're going to lose. If we don't settle conflicts, the front line suffers the most, because when we don't settle something, it's going to get deferred somewhere, and usually it gets deferred down. Would you agree?
Yeah, and one of the things about that too is that the people there at those lower levels, they're not perfect either. So the thing that they're going to do is they're going to pick who they want the winner to be, and they might pick the right person, they might pick the wrong person, or they might pick the convenient person. And either way, they might shortcut the facility out of what the best solution actually is. So those are a lot of things. Those people above that are in such a conflict as that, they need to find a way to mediate that. They need to find a way to have communication to put that behind them. And someone has to step forward, obviously, and initiate that. It would be best if both people initiated that, or at least if both of them were able or willing to take that first step. But often, it takes the best one of them, though, to actually do that. But then again, we've all seen the same ones where we had two people that were equally incompetent, and you just throw your hands up, and you know what? And I've seen situations where at that point the staff just takes things into their own hands. So and rightfully so, because those people are actually beating the process down and putting people in a position of disadvantage. And you don't want to be in a position of disadvantage where the stakes could be your life.
Right. Now, guys, listen, it's natural for us to want to avoid conflict, but you can't when you are leading a team, or you're up there trying to run the house, and that conflict is going to exist because you got multiple departments who could have multiple priorities, and our job is to make sure that we ultimately find a way to meet what the house needs. And if that requires us, again, as I mentioned before, shifting priorities, even if that requires for my department to make a sacrifice so I can help the other department, we have to be willing to do that. That's why it's always good, at least in prison management side, to have these department head meetings and basically meet with all the different departments to see what's happening, and what are we doing right as a team, what are we doing wrong, and what can we do better. And basically these discussions sometimes lead towards conflict. And at the end of the day, if we've already established trust, so everybody at this table knows that we're willing to do whatever we can for the other department, so there's trust established in the exhausted effort, not so much the outcome, because we can't always control the outcome, but if the exhausted effort, the exhausted attempt to help the other department exist, and there's trust as this foundation, then conflict actually helps us move forward. because conflict is where we're able to grow because we're going beyond our own perspective and really evolving dialogue. I mean, I love it when, let's say, Russ got this safety and security perspective, and let's say I'm got this medical perspective, and we're having a back and forth, and the conversation is really just moving up. It's not like Russ is stuck in his position. It's not like I'm stuck in my position. We're literally moving up in the dialogue to try to see, what is the best course of action. And look how much during that dialogue Russ learns from me. I learned from them. I learned from him. And just because we're embracing conflict. Now, granted, a lot of people are afraid of conflict because it pushes people into discomfort. All right. And I get it, but you can't be afraid of conflict in corrections. I mean, as an officer, I can tell you're going to chase conflict at the very beginning. And as management, you're going to chase conflict, but for a different reason. You need the conflict to grow in all those different perspectives. And there's a little picture here real quick that starts where the ideal conflict is in the middle. And on the extremes, you have artificial harmony and mean-spirited personal attack. So remember, when there's no trust in the dialogue or no trust in the foundation, and it hasn't been a real good connection made, and we talked about the vulnerability side, then yes, conflicts could become personal. It becomes a win-loss. At the end of the day, I don't want to do what's best for the agency. I want to do what's best for myself, my department. It's very individualized effort. On the other side of it all is artificial harmony. If there's no conflict and we're not speaking our mind, we're nodding and maybe in agreement, but we really don't believe in anything. We're just being, nice to each other when we see each other. But unfortunately, when we leave and we go back to our department, we're talking shit, which actually tends to be more destructive. So me and Russ, we don't get along, but I just don't want a conflict. So I'm just going to agree with Russ. And then when I go back to my department, I just tell my department, yeah, you wouldn't believe what management's got me doing today. They got me doing A, B, C, D. Okay, well, you know what? That actually tends to be more destructive because the problem is you're just passing out negativity. Artificial harmony, actually, be honest with you, is probably one of the most destructive things in corrections right now. Because a lot of people sometimes are given the chance to speak, have an opportunity to speak about a concern, but instead they don't want to have conflict. So they shut up, they keep quiet, and then when the meeting ends, they go back to their department and pretty much bastardize whatever decision was made, which turns out to be to the front line. They wind up starting getting this generalized assumption of what they feel. In this case, let's say management may think, and that's not the case. I think that that's been a big problem for us for quite some time, where we could get someone who could be very disgruntled because they're afraid to speak their mind. They translate a message to their people that is just a generalized assumption of what their thoughts are. And now that generalized assumption carries out and it causes a divide. Russ, what's your thoughts on this extreme from artificial harmony to destructive, but in the middle is where it's the ideal based on that trust?
Ultimately, those two extremes are just, rooted in one thing, which is breakdown of communication, or even attempting to communicate. Because if we feel that we're just going to end up in conflict if we say something, then we just bury the hatchet, so to speak, but bury it in the wrong way for the wrong reason. But the same thing goes on the other side of it. Is that if we feel that we're not going to be listened to, and we're just going to be stonewalled, and no one's going to value our opinion, and we're working on it in that way, then a lot of times we'll feel like our only recourse is to engage in those personal attacks. And then when we do that to wall ourselves off, from any further conflict, by putting that barrier there, where we're drawing a line in the sand. Don't come across, because you know what happens when you come across that line. And so then what we've actually done at that point is we've painted ourselves into a corner, and neither side is usually able to breach that, to broach that, and be able to try and communicate our way out of it.
Yeah, that's spot on, Russ. And I just want to mention something. If you're one that's hosting these meetings, like as a leader, and you want to facilitate dialogue that can help you grow, again, to be more effective, to kind of help the other departments ultimately help the house, it's good for you to facilitate conflict. It's good for you to give people real-time permission to disagree. I mean, we always do that. If you have me say, does anybody disagree with that thought? Hey, let me get your opinion. Why? And you encourage it, because as I said, most people want to avoid conflict. So you're going to have to, until you can establish that trust, you're going to have to give people permission in real time and say, hey, anybody disagree with that? Please give me your thoughts. I want to hear everything. And as a leader, you may not always want to be the first person to speak, because outside of you establishing the what, because we talked about you establishing the what, if you continue to talk about how you think things should be done, a lot of people will just blindly agree with you because of your position. So basically, once you set the parameters of the dialogue, like this is where I would like to head, and then you kind of say, how should we get there? That's when you push the dialogue out and encourage conflict if need be. Again, even as they're speaking, oh, hey, I love that. It's okay if you disagree. I love that thought, Russ. Yeah, let me hear some more of that. I mean, again, it's something that has to be encouraged until you truly build that trust, because this is something that people want to avoid. They don't want conflict. Now, the good thing about it all is this brings us to number 3. So we're moving up. Once people feel that they've been heard, once they feel that, hey, I didn't agree with Russ, but, at the end of the day, I get his perspective, so I'm willing to try it this way. It's kind of like we agree to disagree, but you still move forward with what needs to be done. You wind up getting commitment, because now here's what happens. Here, me and Russ, let's say, we don't get along, but I respectfully heard Russ's side. Russ respectfully heard my side. So we feel heard. That's the big part of it all. We feel heard. Well, the good thing about it is once Russ is able to say his piece and I'm able to say my piece, and there's the trust underneath it all. Well, you know what? At this point here, hey, you know what? I get it. There could be a level of commitment here because you have been heard. The biggest concern we have when we bring everybody to the table is if there are people that don't feel heard, and if they have a concern, but they're just being ignored, or that concern doesn't matter, that's just medical, minimize their perspective or minimize custody's perspective, it's going to be very hard for you to get commitment because, again, they don't feel involved in that decision. Russ, a good healthy dialogue, even if it's conflict, but where everybody's participating just to kind of see what's the most effective way to move forward, it could lead to people feeling a level of commitment towards whatever plan is moving forward, because at least they felt heard and that they weren't, their perspective, whatever department they represented, wasn't minimized or just tossed aside. Would you agree?
Yeah, there's two. There's really kind of two levels to that, and one of them is if I do feel heard and that you're going to get some level of commitment out of me to do it your way, then that has to be reciprocal, though, and that you have to back me up and you have to give me the things that I need to implement it for you. But that just drops off back to what we were talking about before, which was trust. And so there's obviously some play in this, but we have to be able to get to the point where something is actually being implemented. Talking and planning is never as revealing as action is. The actions that you actually engage in are what are going to reveal both the strengths and the weaknesses of whatever it is that you've decided to do. So, once again, it all bounces back to communication, though.
Yeah, guys, by the way, I didn't mean to say agree to disagree. I meant to say disagree and commit. So let me correct that, because once I said it, I didn't have a chance to look back, but I knew it didn't felt right. It didn't feel right coming out. I meant to say we disagree and we commit. And the good part about this commitment, guys, is that when we make those agreements, and what I mean by agreements is even if we disagree, we've all agreed to move forward in this effort. We have to be specific with the plan of what we're planning to do. Because again, don't forget, we still have to translate that plan to the people that we supervise, but we have to do it in a manner that shows we are committed. Because at the end of the day, every department's always going to have to make a sacrifice when priorities shift. We get that. Sometimes, this department, is the lead. Sometimes that department's the lead, whatever it is. But how we translate it to the people, our subordinates matter. You can't look at these meetings when we're trying to do what's most effective for the house and we all get together as leadership and we make a decision, and then you're leaving that meeting as, man, I can't believe we went this way, and then go ahead and translate that to the front line and saying, yeah, you know what, they didn't even listen to me, blah, blah, blah. No, we have to make sure that we translate a belief. Even if we disagree, we translate a belief that helps people committed to the effort, because that's the key. And it's not about proving right or wrong here. It's like, hey, we all had our discussion. We all agreed that this was the best course of action. So I'm not looking for the I told you so moment. I actually have this in my last book. We're not looking for the I told you so moment. We're looking for the fact that we're all going in committed, and let's go ahead and see what we could do to be most effective for this plan to be carried out. Now this moves us up to, so now guys, think about this. We got 2 more steps now. So once people are committed, so basically there's trust, which helps us embrace conflict, which helps us bring about commitment to people. Now, commitment from the people. Now we can start holding people accountable. Now, accountability is a lot different than conflict. Conflict is usually about ideas or issues. Accountability is usually about behaviors and performance. So accountability is usually a little bit harder for people to hope. It's harder for people to do. A lot of people tend to break away from accountability, but that's part of this cohesive team. So basically what happens here is once you go through the trust, the conflict, the commitment, and you know that people are committed to the idea, then I don't have a problem as manager going up to them and holding them accountable, because I know they're committed. If I know they're committed, then I'm okay with saying, hey, listen, hey, you dropped the ball on that. And I remember you said we were going to do this, and what happened? Is everything okay? But when you get people that aren't committed because they don't feel heard, it's hard to hold them accountable for something they don't believe in. So having said that, accountability does become a lot easier when we get to this level of being a cohesive team, because now we're all invested. We're all have staking it. So now I go to Russ, and Russ felt heard. Russ is now committed. He may not agree with what we're doing, but again, disagree and commit. But he knows that he was heard, and at this point, this is where we're going. And Russ is now, since he's committed, he's got stake in it. So now I have, as management, if Russ may fall back, I shouldn't really have an issue of holding Russ accountable because Russ is committed. Would you agree with that, Russ?
Yeah, but I also think though there's certainly a level in the accountability aspect that's bi-directional. I think that the person who says that, hey, well, I'm going to hold you accountable, they need to do that self-check first. They have to be the one going was any of this any of this accountability, come back to my circle of influence, right? Or am I just trying to find a way to scapegoat certain people because I didn't like the way that someone else tried to hold me accountable for it. So I think that what we should do at whatever our respective level is we should welcome accountability. We should be looking for it. We should be seeking to facilitate it, and we should be using it as a springboard to make ourselves better. Because otherwise, it's more finger pointing. It's just doing this, right? And then we can never move out. We lock ourselves into a position that we can't get out of we can't grow, we can't mature, and that includes, everything, even if you promote, you're not going to be in a position where you're actually doing anything constructive or productive. You've just landlocked yourself into a modality that is going to, across the board, lock everyone else into their own modality, and then there can't be any progress.
Well,
So
Rush,
I think that we should be welcoming accountability, because then, the apportionment of what I did, what I can be held accountable for, can also go back up the chain, and it can also go to the levels below me, and then we can actually start to solve problems and make that progress. Like I say,
Rush,
otherwise we're just landlocked.
yeah, and you said a couple of things that's really spot on. One is you don't move forward with excuses. The blame game will never move you forward. And also, accountability starts with yourself first. I mean, you have to go ahead and show people that you're willing to hold yourself accountable. But I will tell you guys something right now. The best accountability isn't leadership down, it's peer-to-peer. 100% it's peer-to-peer. And, and the reason why it's peer-to-peer, and for one example is, if me and Russ are working together and we're both peers, we're both on the same level, I don't want to have to go to my supervisor and tell him, hey, Russ is doing this wrong, because I'm seen as a rat. But if I know Russ is committed and we're all working together, then I have no problem telling Russ, hey, Russ, man, what happened, man? What's going on? You're not yourself today. I just checked the stuff that, you just searched, and, you were missing all this. What's going on? This usually isn't like you, and I think peer pressure, and I know I'm using the word peer pressure. Sometimes people think it's negative, but peer pressure actually is probably the best avenue for accountability, because the people you work next to are the people, to me, that actually may have the greater influence on you. And also, I want to mention that there's a time and place for it. When it comes to accountability, and it's just an effort to cultivate growth and show somebody, because definitely accountability could equate to love, right? Because, basically it is an effort of love, because I know you're better than this. So I'm going to hold you accountable because I care for you. I think you can do it. For the people that fail to hold people accountable and then you fire them, I think that you're the coward. And it's kind of reflected in this book too, because you could have approached this person a few times already to tell them they were going down the wrong path, but you chose not to want to have conflict. You let the person fail, and now it gets to a point where the failure is so great that you have to remove them. That's not accountability. That's failure on your job to go ahead and correct it when it should have been corrected. But one of the things that they mention here is, when they talk about accountability, should it be done in private or should it be done in public? There are certain aspects of accountability where if you feel that it could lead to some level of discipline, that you're not going to do in public. I mean, this is really me talking to Russ, or Russ talking to me, however you want to do the scenario, where I'm sorry, you're not, you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. I've tried multiple times to correct this action, blah, blah, blah. You're not going to do that in front of everyone, because at that point, this is really a private dialogue between you and that individual, because the individual could be negligent at their job, whatever it is. But you got to, have some integrity in doing that with the individual. But there are times where, if we're all together as a team and we have trust is the foundation, and we have, investment, because I've heard Russ's side, he's heard mine, and we got Russ's commitment. It's not the end of the world to have some level of accountability in front of everyone, so everyone knows that we are holding each other accountable. So it's not something that that the team has to guess is being done, or in some cases assume it's not being done. It's done in the moment because there's already trust. So again, that's a more of a cultivating growth. So, like, let's say, Russ is not himself today, but he's not a negligent individual. It's just today he's having a bad day. We could have a meeting and say, hey, by the way, Russ, hey, what happened today? You weren't on point with your game. What happened? And then the team could also go ahead and get involved in that level of accountability as well. Would you agree with that, Russ? When it comes to accountability, there'll be a time where it should be done in private, but there also could be a time where it could serve great use if done respectfully in public, as long as you have, and when I say public in front of the team, I mean, but when you have that trust within the foundation of that level of accountability.
Yeah, I think that, there's really a lot to unpack there, if you will. For me, it just goes back to, and I just kept hearkening back to what was said before when we talked about the peer aspect of it, because I think that, one of the most powerful things that we have in this whole thing um, is peer leadership. Peer leadership really moves things along much better than necessarily leadership with regards to position and rank and that kind of thing. I know many times where, the right peer of mine would show up and it would change the outcome and the aspect of what we were doing. And I don't know if that dovetails as well into that as I would like, but I just kept thinking about it over and over again, because to me that's a really powerful thing that we can use.
Yeah, and the last part is going to be the results. And here he says, when we talked about this at the beginning, but members of the leadership team are focused on team number one, and they put the collective priorities and needs of the larger organization, so in this case, the needs of the facility, ahead of their own departments. And to me, this matters. I believe that results, when I look at the agency top down, I know where we have to be collectively. I do. And every decision I make, as I said, is filtered from those collective priorities. And it's really getting everybody to think outside of their own area of expertise and to try to get an understanding of what it's like to be that other department or that other individual. So for me, I'm not looking for individualized results. And I know this is tough to say, because let's say Russ represents a department. Let's say Russ is a sergeant and he's welcome to this meeting and we all have this dialogue. And Russ, at this point, because when you have these dialogues, when you have these discussions, usually these meetings, there's two types of ways people are going to express themselves. One is they either advocate or they inquire. I mean, those are the two things right there, right? So Russ is going to come in and probably is going to advocate. He wants to advocate for his department, which makes sense. Now, obviously, when there's trust built, eventually we do start to ask questions, and they're questions based out of curiosity and not judgment. But now Russ is going to advocate because Russ is going to be closer to the people that he represents. Russ goes back and he talks to the people that he supervises. They have a little bit of a family. So I get it. Russ wants to advocate for the people that he works with, that he's close to every day. And now when he gets to these meetings, his mindset's got to shift from where he leads to what's best for the team he's a member on. And that's not an easy thing to do, because, again, he could feel that the moment he shifts, and let's say there is a sacrifice that Russ has to make, he's going to be hurting his people who he's the closest to. But at the end of the day, you got to have that elevated perspective that it goes beyond just your department and beyond just the people that you lead. Russ, what's your thoughts on that, Russ? What's your thoughts on coming to a table? And again, I get it. You advocate or inquire, but when you advocate and then you have to kind of make sacrifices for the betterment of the house, how do you now translate those sacrifices to the people that you're the closest to, who you represent? You're muted, Russ.
Sorry.
That's right.
Sometimes, that's one of the, unfortunate things. You go out there to advocate for your people, and they have an expectation that that you're gonna bring home the bread for them, and you're gonna be able to squash this new policy or this new procedure that's being done, and it's just not the case. And so sometimes, you gotta come back and you say, hey, you know what? We have a hard pill to swallow, and they might look at you and say, man, I expected better. It's just one of those things that we do want to advocate for our people. But at the same time, sometimes what we have to do instead is we have to try and get their buy-in. We have to try and go about it in that big picture world where we're not necessarily the big fan of the new policy, the new procedure, the new administrator, the new governor, or whatever it is, and we have to try and wrangle some type of victory from the jaws of defeat, nonetheless. And I think that that's really where the rubber hits the road. I sometimes feel bad though in ways, because sometimes it seems like that's always the case, that we're always cutting off our nose to spite our face, and we can't eke out any wins. And so being relentlessly optimistic and trying to sell this to the people that really count on us, sometimes in ways can feel like you're involved in a little bit of treachery sometimes. But at the same time, it's better than them just, losing all hope and becoming, really, kind of negative about things. There's so much negativity in the realm that we work in. I just always hate to bring them anymore. So sometimes we have to go out there and be on the offense, and we really have to, go beyond those bounds and eke out victories for our people. But there's a number of supervisors and managers out there that don't even view it that way. They're never advocating for their people. They're always
Yeah.
just there to rubber stamp the policy and procedure and go on. And that's an abandonment of our real responsibilities, because I do feel like it's somewhat of a family endeavor. I want to work with all of these people. That's why I got into this job. I wanted to be around people who were going to do battle for me and were going to protect me at the cost of their own lives, and to render that same thing from myself to them. And it can be disheartening though those um, when those types of things are not realized. But sometimes they are still. So I'll say that.
Well, real quick before we come to a close, remember, guys, at these meetings, Russ, in this scenario here, we use Russ. Russ should know what the concerns are from his people, because he should have that same cohesiveness with his people where we can communicate. And then Russ is able to bring that up to the table. Now, if the meeting doesn't go Russ's favor, Russ still has to go back and translate the overall plan of how we're going to head. But Russ also can't avoid conflict in doing that, because next thing you know, Russ may say, well, man, I can't tell this to my people. So he starts kind of getting involved with the negativity. So now we don't get the commitment because Russ is afraid of conflict. But think about this, guys. This cohesiveness really happens at all levels. If you're inconsistent, if you're incohesive at the lower level, then like Russ kind of mentioned before, you're not bringing up the right concerns to the higher level. So it really does travel up and then back down. Because at the end of the day, if Russ is the kind of supervisor that doesn't really care about what his people think, and they don't talk to him, he has no trust. When Russ comes to the table and it's a chance to advocate or whatever, speak on behalf of his people, he can't, because he has no idea what his people need. And on the adverse of that, if we're having a meeting, and we tend to, even though we disagree, we leave with a commitment, a specific agreement of what has to be done. I need Russ to translate that commitment to the front line, so I actually know that what we're doing, and God forbid we fail, we have tried 100%. Because the last thing I want is for a plan to be sabotaged, even though that they say is usually not the case. The biggest concern when it comes to this divide is people that don't buy in, and then they wind up just just translating negativity on down the line, and eventually it just winds up causing more of a silent but deadly concern that could be very divisive, because you have people that aren't buying in, because of one person who's translating just negativity. Hey, Russ, anything you like to say in closing? This was a good topic. So basically, Russ, a cohesive team begins with trust, which allows for conflict, which then allows for commitment, and then allows for a level of accountability. It ultimately leads towards results. So now, mind you, guys, if it was a dysfunctional team, it goes backwards. You're not getting the results because you can't hold anybody accountable, because no one's committed, because you don't allow them to engage in conflict, because there's no trust.
Yeah, just, remove the obstacles that, keep you from success, and I think that, you see in the pyramid there and stuff, really makes the abstract more concrete. There's a lot of people that would never give a second thought to this kind of thing, and it's not just another diagram. It's a blueprint for some concrete thinking to remove some of the impediments that might give you some more success, or maybe even just a more pleasant place to work. Effort, intentionality and effort will go a long ways.
Yes, the two things you're in control of: your own intentionality and I guess it's effort, and then attitude and effort. As always, guys, the show is Tear Talk. If you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. Stay safe.